Today's story is about St. Nicholas, whose day we remember on December 6th, so right around the second Sunday of Advent, generally leading up into Christmas. Before we start our story, we have to remember just a couple of things. The first is that scale doesn't matter. So these girls could be living in this little tiny poor house, and it just works. You have to use your very most excellent imagination to make that happen. And then the second thing is, notice they have no faces. So you can imagine whosever face you would like onto these girls. And the third thing is that we always bring it to us with a song. Sing me a song of saints, saints that are bold and true. Sing me a song of saints that lived like me and you. And because it's the second Sunday of Advent, we're going to begin by lighting our Advent candle also. St. Ruth Bear has been keeping an eye on it for us. So how long ago did this story take place? How long ago did this Nicholas live? Nicholas was a bishop in Myra, which is on the Mediterranean. He lived so long ago. It's remarkable that his memory is still with us. If you think about all the greats in front of a grandfather's name, it would take 50 greats to get all the way back to St. Nicholas's time, about 300 AD. Just think of, and each one of those greats represents the life of an entire person, oh my goodness, or at least 30 years of their life. So we have to go a long way back, and yet we still have stories of him, stories that tell us about his kindness, and especially toward children, and his generosity, how generous he was. The first story we have, and the one that we're most sure of, is actually true and not just enhanced rumor from many, many tellings. The first story tells us about three girls. Now, back in these days, girls weren't valued as much as they should be. What was really valued back in 300 AD was strength, brute strength, the ability to build a house with your bare hands and chop wood with your bare hands and butcher a cow with your bare hands. It was strength that was honored in the community. So when you had a girl, and when it was time for her to get married, with the girl went a bag of money to the house of her new husband. That money was because, in a very practical way, this girl would be another mouth to feed, and that would take simple money. Also, it might be a while. Whatever the family's business was, perhaps she had to learn some of that so that she could help out. And while she was learning, she might not be as helpful as she would be later when she was skilled. So it's called a dowry. And if a girl didn't have a dowry, and something very sad had happened, like it had in this house, we have a father with no mother and no money. So even though our oldest girl was ready to marry a very nice young man, there was no dowry, no gold to go with her. And so the father, strapped beyond all possibilities to feed these girls any longer, said that he would sell her for money into a place where she would be a slave for the rest of her life, simply working day out, sun up to sundown, and sometimes at things that she really didn't want to do. Very, very sad. Well, Nicholas heard about this. One of his friends told him that there was a family in such straits that the father was selling his beautiful daughter into slavery. And so, late at night, St. Nicholas went by the father's home and tossed in a bag of gold. Well, in the morning, the father was so very happy, and he didn't think of spending it for himself. He gave it to his oldest daughter as her what's called a bride price, so that she could go off and marry the young man she really wanted to marry and live happily ever after. Things went along all right for a while, but again, things got tough in the little house. And the second daughter, who also had a young man that she very much wanted to marry, couldn't afford to bring a dowry with her because there was no money. St. Nicholas again heard that the father was about to sell the daughter into slavery. And he snuck by again, late at night, and threw a bag of gold into the house so the father wouldn't have to sell his daughter into a horrible life. And instead, she got to marry the young man that she very much wanted to and go off to live happily ever after. Things go on as they do. Food is eaten, times get hard, jobs don't appear, and the last little daughter was ready to get married to a very nice young man. But again, no money. St. Nicholas heard again about her plight. But the father was also a smart man. It was no fault of his own that he was so poor. Anyway, the father stayed up one night, 2 nights, 3 nights before selling his daughter into slavery. Stayed up all night long. And in the middle of the night, when St. Nicholas went by to throw the gold into the window, the father caught it and found out it was St. Nicholas and spread word of how extraordinarily kind this Nicholas was. And this little daughter also got to marry the man of her dreams and live happily ever after. That's the story that we absolutely know is true about this Nicholas. So, how kind was he? The next story we hear about Nicholas happens down at the docks, down at the seaport on the beautiful Mediterranean, where he saw a huge pile of grain going into a boat. And he asked about it, and the sailors said, well, it's for the emperor. It's all going to the emperor's city, and none of this will be left behind. And Nicholas said, well, how much grain is left in the city? And the sailors said, none. This is all the grain that should be in the city for the next 2 years. Nicholas said, what will the children eat if there's no bread? Sailors said, we don't know. We just were told to take this stuff across the ocean. Well, Nicholas was known as a bishop, as a holy man. And when he said, you must not do that, you must unload the grain and leave it here for the children who need it, the sailors grumbled. But they believed in St. Nicholas, and they allowed it to happen, and all the grain was put back into the city where it belonged for the children to eat for the next 2 years. The boat went across the beautiful sea. In the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the sea, a terrible storm came up and rocked the waters and rocked the boat. But Nicholas knew a storm was going on, and he calmed the waters from where he was so the boat could get to where it was going, across the Mediterranean. And when it got there, the sailors went down into the hold of the boat to get the other things out. And on top of everything was all the grain that had been unloaded at the other city. But now there was more. More so that these children could have bread all winter. Our last story about Nicholas was a traveling man. He traveled to another city. And here he had heard rumor about a butcher, a sausage maker. Now you might think this is a nice man, this sausage maker, because he does, after all, have this friendly hound dog with him. But in truth, the hound dog was just there because the sausage maker always smelled so good. Sometimes there was a little tiny bit of sausage on the tips of his robe, and the dog could get that. Well, times were hard in this village too. And before long, our sausage maker didn't have anything to make into sausage. Well, in those days, children didn't go to school. They helped out all day long, or they ran around doing errands in the streets. Children were very available and very underfoot. Well, the sausage maker had a thought. It wasn't a nice thought. It was a very bad thought. But he thought to himself, I could probably snag those little boys and maybe put them in a barrel and brine them and sell them as hams. Or perhaps I could turn them into sausages. And so he did. One little rascal running around on the streets got snagged by our sausage maker, and into the sausage making machine he went. And out of the sausage making machine came sausages. Oh my goodness, little boy sausages. Well, those were pretty popular in the open market, and the sausage maker grabbed another little boy and put him in the sausage making machine. And our sausage maker had even more sausages on his shelves to sell. And then one more little boy he found on the streets running around alone, and whoop, into the sausage making machine he went and ground him till there was plenty of sausage on the shelves. Well, Nicholas heard about this and he was horrified. Well, he went and he told the sausage maker off, gave him the old what for, and said, "What on earth are you doing, turning little boys into sausages?" And St. Nicholas went to the sausage making machine and cranked it the other way. Cranked it, and out came one little boy. And kept cranking and cranking. The sausage goes back into the machine, and out comes another little boy. Nicholas could tell he wasn't done yet. Kept cranking, and out came one last little boy. Now, we don't know what happened to the sausage maker. We assume that his life was not good after this, because after all, what kind of sausage maker would make sausage out of little boys? And we hope that the little boys ran away and weren't caught out on the streets by anybody again. And certainly we hope they ran off with his nice hound dog, because everybody needs a nice hound dog. 3 miracles from our Saint Nicholas, who is the patron saint of sausage makers and also ham makers. Also sailors and people who work on the docks. And also sometimes a symbol that's used for him is a bag of gold or an orange. But he is a saint for all children, isn't he? Because children are our hope. Children are the hope we hold in our hearts for the future. And hope must be cradled in love. And that's the end of our story. Sing me a song of saints, saints that are bold and true. Sing me a song of saints that lived like me and you.